It's like green energy. You think the Chinese believe in green energy? Right. They're buying your coal because they don't. Not for 1 second. They're like, oh, the White Swan wind farms, let's make some more. This is why everyone hates the Chinese. I do not hate the Chinese. They're doing what they think is in their best interest. I mean, I don't want to live in China, okay, at all.
In this video, Tucker Carlson has given his final speech from his Australian tour and explains the consequences of what happened when a country elects bad leaders and then continues to allow those same bad leaders to sell out the citizens for one reason or another. Whether it's for money, power, or evil, he breaks down the simplest of methods, how to see what a bad leader represents, and how their actions show us they are bad for a nation. Now let's get into it.
And I know everyone's like, well, smoking's bad. Yeah, of course smoking's bad. Lots of things are bad. But it's not really anyone's business, is it? I guess wearing a seatbelt's a good idea. I mean, I don't, but my kids say it's a good idea. But when they're forcing you to do things for your own good, over time you question, like, is this really for my own good, or are they just softening me up to obey? So when it really comes down to it, when they want to inject me with some creepy compound that hasn't been tested, that they'll be able to like shoot me with a rubber bullet if I decline. And I'll be so trained to be obedient that I'll kind of put up with it. And I won't do what I should do, which is stage, like, I don't want to say I'm going to get arrested. I shouldn't put up with that. Because that is not a free country, that's a tyranny. And you have absolutely no obligation under the most basic precepts of human rights and natural law to put up with that for 1 second, period. They are the criminals. You are not the criminals. They don't care about your country, which belongs to you. So when they tell you it's not your country, that you're on someone else's land and you should feel bad about that, how is that a democracy? It's not a democracy. Because what's the basic idea of democracy? The citizens own the country. It's their country. It's not feudal land. They're not living here at the pleasure of the Lord. They can't just be shot with rubber bullets if they disagree with his decrees, because they own it. They're not renters, they're owners. That's the basic idea of democracy. However it's administered, whether it's a parliamentary system, whether it's direct democracy, as in Athens, whether it's a constitutional republic, representative democracy is the one that I live in, the idea never changes. The country belongs to its people, period. And if they're telling you at every landing of every commercial flight, in every government speech at the entrance to the Anglican church in downtown St. Paul's, that it's not your country, you cannot put up with that. Yeah, you cannot put up with that. Because you know what's going to happen is what's happening now, which is they will completely change your country, make your life much worse, make it absolutely impossible for your children to have the lives that you gave them. In other words, for your civilization to continue, because that's what that is. They will eliminate all of that, and you won't be able to say a word, because why are you complaining? It's not your country. And I can promise you that in 50 years, what you have will not exist. It will not exist. I'm sorry to say that out loud. The only reason I'm saying that, it's such a heavy thing to say, and it makes me, I feel a little rude saying it. But I just liked what I've seen so much. I've been so impressed by this country that I think to myself, really, the only way you could wreck a place like this is on purpose. Really, is on purpose. You don't need anything here.
And that's the way I feel about the United States. We don't need to be buying oil from other countries, we don't need to be buying steel from other countries, and we definitely don't need to be buying our medicine from other countries.
Hearing about your energy costs almost drove me, I almost put my fist through the wall. Someone was saying, well, I can't do that. I was asking dumb questions, you have, the world's largest deposits of iron ore from which steel is made. I said, well, how many steel mills? Well, none. Why? Because energy's too expensive. I said, well, too bad you don't have any thermal coal here. Oh, wait, you have the world's largest deposits of thermal coal in the world? So why do you have such high energy costs? Well, because we sell our coal to China, which uses it to make renewables, which we then buy back. Okay.
And that reminds me of this little clip that I saw from the All In podcast yesterday. Check it out.
You can look at interior with that. You can look at environmental with a lot of that, where the environment can be controlled by the states instead of this big bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. I mean, what do you do when China's burning all the coal and they're sending the ashes over the United States? Because that's what happens. It takes 3.5 days and it blows over the United States. In the meantime, we're keeping things good. We produce clean coal. We're going to produce clean energy, but we have to get back to energy. We're spending trillions of dollars on artificial, weak energy that's not going to fire up our plants. Our plants have to be fired up.
That's not an accounting error. That was not a mistake made in good faith. It's not like the accountants over at Parliament House or whatever they call it. They're like, look at the books one day and be like, all those estimates we had about wind farms, it actually doesn't add up. That we sell our country's resources to a faraway country to make something that doesn't work and then pay extra for it. Like, they knew that wasn't going to work when they did it, obviously, because that's insane. It's prima facie insane. The fact that you have high energy costs is reason enough to get rid of the people who are running your country. Because guess what? Everybody else knows, except the English-speaking countries, including mine, which are on one level the most impressive countries that have ever existed in human history, clearly. Certainly the kindest and most decent. Well, they gave us science, okay? They invented the airplane. They're the most impressive societies ever created, but they're also on some level the most naive or the dumbest. What everybody understands around the world is that there's a direct line between cheap energy and civilization. The cheaper energy you have, the fewer babies who die when they're born, period. The cheaper energy you have, the fewer women get worn out by life in their mid-30s. I mean, go to countries with expensive energy in the developing world, and you will see the physical toll on people from having to live in a society where they can't afford energy. I mean, it wears people out. It wrecks their lives. We're happy because we have cheap energy in a lot of ways. And so if they're intentionally making it more expensive, just like if they're making it impossible for your kids to buy houses, or if they're shooting you with rubber bullets, at some point you have to connect the dots and say, these people aren't just neglecting me, they hate me. There's no other explanation for that. By the way, if this were happening in a family, so the model for all human organizations is the family, which is the building block of any civilization. Mom, dad, kids. I know they're trying to scramble that a little bit. Future generations will look back on this and be like, that was the craziest thing that ever happened. I have an idea. Why don't you castrate your children? Yeah. By the way, I thought the government, when I was a kid, I know I'm digressing, but there's just so much. This country is so close to the country I live in, it's like really weird. It's like running into a relative you didn't know you had. You're like, wow, we look alike. How strange. Except you use the word wanka, and I don't know what that means. But in every other way, it's my new favorite word, by the way. I'm putting it in my suitcase for the trip home tomorrow. I'm going to unveil it at dinner parties. And I'm never going to ask anybody what it means, because I know it's something bad. But if I know, then I won't be able to say it with a straight face. But I'm going to drop that, no exaggeration, the second I get home at dinner. Be like, you're all wankas. I learned that from my Australian friends. Excuse me. Anyway, but the building block of any civilization is, of course, the family, the nuclear family. Husband, wife, children. Because that mirrors the natural order, the biological order, from which everything is derived. Now, Christians believe that's because God set it up that way. But also, scientists believe that because it's true, and there's no debating that it's true, okay? And so it would stand to reason that the deepest desire of the human heart, of course, is to reproduce. That's the whole point, right? That is the story of evolutionary biology, is to reproduce, to pass on your genes. And you get to a certain age, and you've done that, and so the most pressing agenda on your list is to have grandchildren before you die. And so if they're telling you, no, what you really want, no, you got that wrong. In fact, 1 million years of human civilization has got it totally wrong. We just figured it out about 18 months ago. What you really want is to castrate your children And then you'll have no hope of passing on your genes. And then you'll be happy. By the way, they don't buy this in real countries like China. They're like, yeah, okay, yeah, all right. It's like green energy. You think the Chinese believe in green energy? Right. They're buying your coal because they don't. Not for 1 second. They're like, oh, the White Swan wind farms, let's make some more. This is why everyone hates the Chinese. I do not hate the Chinese. They're doing what they think is in their best interest. I mean, I don't want to live in China, okay, at all. I detest the fact it's an atheist society. There's a lot about China I don't like. I hate the way they treat animals. But I hate that, actually. But one thing I admire about China is they act in China's interest. I'm sorry, I can't complain about that. That's what countries are supposed to do. I wish we had leaders like that. In my country, spend all this time hating on China. It's like, let's take out the kind of murdering people for their organs part, or the eating dogs, which are deeply offensive to me.
And so I guess we'll have to set aside the fact that they still have slavery in the form of how they treat the Uyghur Muslims, which is offensive to all Americans.
But let's keep the part where the government acts in the interest of the nation, which is the only legitimate use of a government's power. Like, I admire that. So if they can sell you wind turbines or solar panels because you're dumb enough to send them your coal to do it, kind of in the W column for China, no? Whose fault is that? It's yours and mine. I mean, my country does exactly the same thing. So you're not going to get me to rant about China. I want to learn from China. You know, maybe you guys can get your domestic manufacturing back and go sell windmills to somebody else who's dumb enough to buy them. You should do that. I've heard Belgium is looking to expand its green energy profile. And by the way, you could do that because you don't need anything. You have, if there's one like sincere criticism of Australians I would level after 2.5 weeks here, way too happy. It's such a happy country that people don't pause, A, to consider how bad it could be. They don't. And B, they don't really, with respect, in the US the same way, they don't really appreciate how great it is. They really don't. They don't. If you were designing a country, what would you want? Well, the first thing you would want is natural resources. Okay? That's the most important thing. The most important thing, and this may be news here in Melbourne, is not banking. It's not. Banking doesn't make an economy. Banking is, in some sense, possibly a necessary feature of advanced economies, but it's not integral to any economy. Loaning money and interest actually used to be considered disgusting. In fact, it was illegal. It still is illegal in some places. So the idea that we've made that like the apogee of human achievement, lending money, no, it's not. No, making things is the point of life. Making things is the point of life. And in order to make things, you need resources. And you have more resources than you could ever use. For the next 1,000 years, you're totally set. You need nothing. You've got more than enough land. There's nobody here. There's nobody here. I've flown over beaches recently. I was like, what, was someone going to build a Club Med there or what? I just saw like 30 miles of beautiful coastline. In my country, people would be murdered over the rights to that. Here, it's just like, oh yeah, we got a lot of that. Like, no one lives here. You lead the world in resources, in gas, in bauxite, which is kind of important actually, in iron ore, in coal, in lead, in gold, you name it, copper, you've got it. The rest of the world, uranium, oh my gosh, whoever said that, thank you. I totally forgot about uranium. I think of the deepest reserves in the world here. Did you say wanka? I don't think that's a natural resource, but maybe it is. I gotta look that up, actually. The point is, you don't need Great Britain. You don't need any other country. You could, honestly, kind of run the world. You've got no real poverty. No, I mean, there are poor people here, but you don't have dense concentrations of poverty that I've seen in 7 separate cities, and I look for it. You don't. You will, but you don't now. You've got a very well-educated and impressive and smart population. Like, what don't you have? You don't need anybody around. You should be running the world. I mean, I personally would immediately buy a nuclear weapon just to make that point clear to the rest of the world. I'm not kidding. Probably not going to do that. You're not even allowed to have handguns. You're probably not buying nukes. But you should get both. Sorry, I know you hate that, but I feel that way. And once you realize that, then there is absolutely no reason to let your leaders destroy the place. You just need to say no. And the first thing you do, so how does that work exactly? I was getting so upset talking to this awesome Pakistani tobacco shop guy yesterday. The poor guy, it's like, anyway, it really bugged me. I had a long conversation with him about it that got so out of control that I can't repeat it here because we'll all be arrested, but he was on board. He's probably here tonight, by the way, if you're here. But how do you do that? How do you do that if you're an orderly, peaceful person, by the way? Because, the problem with changing your society is it can move in super ugly directions super fast, and no decent person wants that. Now, the people running your country definitely want that. They're the ones who shot you with rubber bullets and set up concentration camps for you, in case you've forgotten. Wrecked the economy of Victoria and many other, right? I mean, the cost of that made you take the COVID shot and then ignored the injuries that it caused. Just totally ignored them. So they have no problem with force. But normal people have a lot of problem with force. I have a lot of problem with force. I'm a Christian. I mean, I'm a believer in a religion that rejects force, actually, rejects hurting other people, that calls for you to pray for your enemies. It's a little weird that they hate Christians so much, don't you think, by the way? Parenthetically, it's a little strange. If I was running a country and I don't care what religion I was, I'd want to import a lot of Christians. Just because, by definition, like sincere Christians. Because literally their religion says you're not allowed to go hurt people. Instead, you have to kind of like work hard, stay married to the same person, take care of your children. I'm like, even if I thought the religion was absurd, even if it was not my religion at all, I'd be like, let's import a bunch of those. Because they're clearly the least threatening, the most productive citizens you could possibly have. In fact, this country was built originally by Christians. All those 5 countries were. That's why they're great countries. That's why they have human rights. Because respecting the rights of other people is a Christian precept. It doesn't exist in non-Christian countries. I'm sorry, it doesn't. Christians are unique in that they believe that each person was created by God, and therefore his rights, the right to say what you really think, the freedom of speech, the right to practice any religion you want, the right not to be a slave, those are endowed by God, not government. Elbow didn't give you those. You were born with them. Yeah, no, I'm serious. So like, why would they hate people like that? Those seem like, again, even if you don't agree with the religion, or any religion, wouldn't you want that? And of course, they're the ones they hate most. That tells you a lot about their agenda, I would say. And I think the thing that they hate most about Christians, leaving aside the spiritual explanations, which I personally think are real, but maybe you don't, but just as a political matter, what they don't like about Christians is Christians recognize that those rights are inherent, they're bestowed by God, not people, and they can't be taken away. That's why Christians led the abolitionist movement. We don't have slavery because of Christians. And in non-Christian countries, there still is slavery. It's really simple. I'm sensing they don't teach this in Australian schools. Right, okay. The only reason we recognize that any of these human rights that we're supposedly defending are rights at all is because of Christianity. It's the only reason. That's the only reason. Who do you think defined those as human rights? Christians. Because they were Christians. So if you hate Christians, you're making me a little nervous. What exactly are we doing that's scaring you so much? Well, we're acknowledging a God above you. That's the real sin. Sorry, Jacinda Ardern. You're not God. You're just some silly lady with bad teeth. Like, stop. No, I don't mean you harm, but I'm certainly not going to worship you. But they've set up this bizarre religion in your country. It's really noticeable. I'm sure you don't even notice it. Like all these flags are flying all over the place. The transgender flag. I said to my driver yesterday, like, what is that? He's like, transgender. I can't even do his accent. I was like, who puts that up? The city? So that's your religion? Really? Yeah, it is. Well, you can't worship false religions. First of all, the state shouldn't be imposing a religion on you. That is a religion. Not so different from Rome. Worship our gods or we'll punish you. And the early Christians said, okay, I'll be punished then, because I'm not worshiping your gods. Happy to live next to you. I'm a tolerant person by my nature. Christians are tolerant by nature. They're not allowed to convert by force. They're not allowed to force you to believe anything, because God created you. We didn't. But the one thing I can't do, I'm not allowed to do, is worship false gods, including your transgender cult or whatever.
And with that, I think I'll just wrap up there, and I'll add that Christ is king. If you agree with that, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please share it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.